Kevin Briggs is an author and specialises in consciousness and the connection of ETs and UFOs. His recently published book is titled Spiritual Consciousness, A Personal Journey, and covers 56 years of experiences of ET contact and UFO connections. He's on a mission, probably reluctantly at first, but has quickly garnished plenty of interest as he attempts to help people find spiritual consciousness, and he's about to join us. Hello, Kevin.
Hi, Dean. How are you today?
Great. Good to speak with you again.
Yes, thank you for inviting me again. I enjoyed our last conversation we had, so thank you for inviting me back again.
Well, let's start there, because that was back on, in fact, it was the first weekend in February when we had the online summit that you were a part of, but we actually recorded the interview before then, and you alluded to some type of disclosure taking place on that weekend. Did it happen?
I did allude to that. You're quite correct. No, I did go up to New York. What I was told from the ETs directly, there was going to be a mass sighting in New York on February the 1st. And I thought it was very interesting that you rescheduled your online event to that particular weekend as well. So, and there were many other things going on at that weekend relating to the ETs. So, no, I did go up there with my wife. And I met a friend of mine there. He's a producer, Robin C. Adams, and he was going to film the craft if they appeared. I did find out that, which I didn't know before, that Robin was an experiencer as well. He'd had some experiences when he was a child, and he's lived in New York all his life. So we did a small interview, but it was very low cloud, and nothing appeared at all. So disappointing from that perspective. However, it was a good weekend. It was my birthday on the February the 2nd, so we had a good weekend. But interesting that I was led to contact you to see, if we can talk again. And yesterday, Robin contacted me and sent me some pictures of craft that he's now seen over New York in the evening sky. 4 or 5 lights, stationary, flashing, and they're there for about 3 hours, from 1 a.m. till about 4 a.m. And he's put that out there. So he's become part of this now, because he's now showing that there are craft over New York, showing themselves on a regular basis. And I've heard of many other contacts now. Many other people have been contacted. And my ETs did tell me that there will be more and more mass sightings globally leading up to the reveal. And that's what's happening now. There seems to be more and more people talking about it, more and more sightings. In fact, I think there's one coming up, a CE5 group. They have 50,000 members globally, and they're doing a CE5 meditation to make contact with the ETs. And that's a huge group led by Costa McChris. Just an amazing event, So things are moving forward quite rapidly, I think. My personal opinion is that they're moving forward quite rapidly now. So
okay, so I've often wondered, and I'm starting to believe it more and more, that the consciousness group perhaps is the key to disclosure. I know when I interviewed Grant Cameron, he's now swung that way as well. Do you believe that?
Yes, I do. But the whole thread of my contact with the ETs from the age of 8, which, as you know, continues to this day, has been one of consciousness itself, shared consciousness with the ETs, with the other life forms, with the plants, the trees, the earth itself. We all share that. And what they did teach me, that they use consciousness as a conduit for communication, a conduit for creation itself. And all the modalities of contact use consciousness as a conduit. That's the connecting key there. And I know that Ray Hernandez is bringing out a new book in October, I think, A Greater Reality. And he's bringing all these scientists together with some of the experiencers and just connecting all the dots, really. And he's been asked by his ET guides to form a new consciousness and contact research institute. And so he's moving forward. We all seem to have our own little piece of that jigsaw to help with this huge reveal, which is happening. It's happening as we speak, and it's happening to many now. So, in fact, I made a list earlier of all the people that seem to be working on this. And I've met quite a few of them. I'm quite surprised when I write the list down. I can probably read it to you. We've also got Ray Hernandez, who I've just mentioned, Dr. Rebecca Hardcastle-Wright with the Exo Consciousness Group. She's an experiencer. I know Rebecca, she's had contact all her life. Mary Rodwell, I was just watching another interview with Mary this morning, a fascinating woman. She's had contact as well. Grant Cameron, you've mentioned, Seb Talk, Terry Lovelace, and I've spoken with him this morning, and he's working on it. He's had his own experiences with the ETs, although some of them were very benevolent towards him. His story is slightly different. It's the other side of it, probably. But because Terry's an assistant, or retired assistant attorney general, he carries some weight, and he's a retired law professor. And I know two other attorneys here who are experiencers, and they're speaking out. And I know Mike Merber and Lou Angelwolf, they have their own radio show, IMHO.love, every, I think, Wednesday at 7:30. They're talking about the ETs. They're both experiencers, and they have quite a following now. So, and there are many others. There's Karen Swain in Australia, Susie Hansen. She talks about the 3 waves of experiencer. I listened to an interview by her the other day. Absolutely fascinating. I've mentioned Costa McCreese, Susan Schatzer. She's now talking about consciousness and the ET presence on a regular basis on her shows. And I was speaking with Kathy Marden the other day, and she's now involved with a TV show in relation to her aunt and uncle, Betty and Barney Hill. Denise Stoner, she's continuing to speak with other experiencers. I spoke with her the other day. She's the assistant director for MUFON down here in Florida. And then there's another lady I was speaking to the other day, Mia Ferraletto. She has a consciousness and contact conference on July 23rd to 27th, and in South Dakota, I believe, again. And there's some of the leading speakers going up there to talk about the ET contact, but it's all related to consciousness. That is the key to the communication. And once we understand that, and we are beginning to understand that, and in fact, it's quite interesting when many years ago, you couldn't talk about telepathic communication, but now we as experiencers, when we get together, we talk about telepathic communication. I understand it, I know how it works, and that as I said before, it's consciousness itself, it's the conscious energy, and we have to think of consciousness as an energy, and that's how we can then use it for communication and travel and creation, as I've mentioned before. And the creation is using thought consciousness to create that reality, which is what we are now doing.
And I guess just to the you know, the ordinary layman like myself, although I'm wrapping my head around consciousness and what it is, and but to the person who's never experienced what you're talking about, how do they know, you know, when they are being conscious?
That's a very good question indeed. I think we all understand that we are conscious in respect that we live, we breathe, we have relationships with family and friends, we have pets, animals, and they're conscious. We know that because they live, they breathe, they move, they do all the things that we do. What we're talking about now is higher levels of consciousness, which is only a vibrational frequency, and that's the difference between the higher dimensions, which they've explained that to me. They even give me an equation for calculating the vibrational frequency of a dimension. I mean, that's just fascinating. I couldn't find anybody that understood that equation. And then I was speaking with an experiencer, and she has an understanding of mathematics, and I gave her the equation, and she explained it to me. I think I put it in a book that's coming out later on this year. So again, but you are correct. It's that thread of consciousness, and the ETs use that. And the only reason why we don't see them on a regular basis is because they have to bring their vibrational frequency down so they can communicate with us. Or like myself, I take my vibrational frequency a little bit higher, and that allows me, and because I have an understanding of telepathic communication, because of all the years I've been practicing it, with confirmation, I might add, it all helps. But we're all here, and these people I've mentioned today, there are many, many more now working towards this. And what better time than now, really? We are in the change of a new world order. Perhaps we can create a society we desire for our children, for our future generations. And let's create that society using thought and consciousness, including the extraterrestrials. What a society that would be for our future generations.
Right. So again, for the person that hasn't experienced that higher level of consciousness, I mean, what would they need to use it for? To make contact with non-human intelligences, or for other things?
Well, I think for other things, as I say, there's many things. You can contact your deceased relatives. There are many mediums that do that. And that's using consciousness as the conduit for contact with your deceased family members. They're not deceased, they've moved to that higher level of consciousness. And I was given that experience of meeting with 30 generations of my deceased, as we call them, deceased family members. When I was 16, 17, 18, I was shown how to go and visit them using consciousness again, and I would go and visit and interact with them, but on that higher level of consciousness. And I did that for a period of 2 years. But that was to help me understand, again, a different part of consciousness. We have the physical down here in our third dimension, and my deceased family and relatives now live in the higher dimension without a physical. They're just pure conscious energy.
And when you talk about vibrational frequency, I immediately think of the law of attraction. I'm not sure if you've heard of Abraham Hicks and Esther Hicks, who teaches vibrational frequency. I mean, is that the same thing?
Yes, I would say it's the same thing, yes. I have read a little bit about the law of attraction. It's not something I normally talk about, but it's the same thing. You put the information out there, and then you're able to create that using your own thought and your consciousness itself. And when we realize that ability that we have, we can move forward as a society exponentially. It sounds simple to me because I understand it. I've been taught all these things over many years. And it's only when I start talking about them that I realize what they've taught me. It's just fascinating and amazing, really.
Yeah, and I also cast my mind back to Earl Nightingale. I mean, I'm not saying I'm that old, but the famous presentation he made about asking and receiving. And of course, I mean, you read the New Testament Bible. It's ask and you shall receive. So I'm tying the two in. I think the two.
I would say there's many connections. I think we as a species, as humanity, have been on this journey for as long as we first came to this planet. Whether we were seeded here, whether we were created, I don't fully understand that yet. But I think we've had contact with these higher conscious beings, and they're guiding us. We're a very young human species. We are still developing, still evolving. And the next stage in the evolution is understanding consciousness. And our scientists are moving into that realm now, where they're beginning to understand this. Then once we do, it opens up the new realities that there are around us that we don't normally see. I'm able to tap into these realities again because I think they've given me those abilities or activated some part of my DNA. But we all have these abilities, we just don't use them.
Recently, I interviewed Kelly Sammy, who is a near-death experiencer, and she's doing some great work at the moment, but she actually died 12 years ago, left her body, and as I say, she died and she had her experience but came back. But when she came back, and she explained, the way she explained it to me is that she came back to her physical body, but she was basically two identities, consciousness and the physical body. And she identifies more with her consciousness being.
Right, okay, I would agree with that. When I was 9 years old, I was shown by Ort, one of the higher conscious beings, ETs, whatever label you want to put on them, how to separate my consciousness from my physical at the age of 9. And at that time, I didn't really fully understand the full potential of it. What I used to do, I would just leave my body, I'd relax, open my mind, leave my body and go and visit my grandparents who lived in Liverpool, 70 miles away. I would sit upstairs in the master bedroom, in the dressing room there, and I could see down through the opaque floor, and my grandmother would be in the kitchen cooking, usually on a Sunday, and my grandfather either watching TV or reading the newspaper. And I would just sit there and get comfort from doing that. But that was just separating my consciousness. But I often wondered, what would they see if they came upstairs? I'm here in their master dressing room, and what would they see? I now know the answer to that. They would have seen my pure conscious energy, which would have been 4 to 6 inches across, an orb shape, slightly vibrating, orangey yellow in colour. And that would have been my conscious energy, which I've transported over there to see them. So I suppose that's like having a near-death experience without the near-death experience.
Right.
And I used to use that all the time. And it wasn't until I got to 16, 17, 18 again, and I thought, nobody talks about this. So I started asking my friends. We didn't have the internet then, and nobody knew anything about it. So I just accepted it and then asked my ET guides again for more information, and they continued with the lessons. And what they tended to do was they didn't sit me down in a classroom and taught me individual things. They gave me an experience, and the experience was the lesson itself, and showing me how to travel outside of the body as pure conscious energy, which I can still do to this day. And that's how they can travel as well. That's how they communicate as well. So if I have those abilities, because it's been awakened in me, then we can awaken those abilities in others. And it doesn't take much. I have a friend of mine who I worked with for many years. He was a detective, still a good friend. He's retired now. And he comes over every year for a vacation. And he's always been a total skeptic, doesn't believe in ETs, UFOs, or anything spiritual at all. But we're still very good friends. And one day we were sat out by my pool deck. It was me, my wife, him and his wife. And I said, did you want a beer? So he said, yeah, I'll have a beer. So I went into the house. I got a couple of beers. As I was getting the beers out of the fridge, I said to the ETs, now will be a good time to show us a craft. So I got the 2 beers. I walked back out into the pool deck. I opened the beers, sat down, gave him a bottle and me a bottle, and a craft appeared immediately at the back of our home. It flew horizontally, stopped, horizontally again, stopped, horizontally again, and then just shot straight up at a huge speed. So my friend was absolutely astounded.
Wow.
Now, does he believe now in ETs and UFOs and consciousness? Yes, he does. He now does his own research. He was awakened by one episode of seeing a craft. So I think we all have that. We just need that key to open the door. It might be a feeling that you feel a deceased family member stood next to you. You can feel that extra energy. If you allow yourself to open up to that energy, then you can have that communication with using consciousness itself. Yes.
Okay. What do you say to, I mean, I'm a pretty spiritual person, and I know you have a different definition for spiritual as opposed to religious spiritualism. But how do you respond to somebody in the religious world who will tell you, well, you know, you're fooling around with things that you shouldn't be fooling around with?
Well, yes, I've heard that. I think a lot of religious people say that they are demons and devils. Well, there may well be levels of consciousness where there are demons and devils. There are so many different levels. And one just has to be careful. I've always been aware of the negative side, shall we say, of consciousness, the lower vibrations. And but if you are aware of that, you can protect yourself on that and keep to the higher vibrational frequencies. But in relation to religion, the ETs told me that our religious teachings, all the religions, they have excellent teachings in there. We just need to continue that teaching now to bring all the religions together and join the religions again with consciousness. They're all based on faith. They're all based on their own gods. But the story that they tell is all the
Yeah.
same.
Yep.
So if we bring all that together, then we develop as a species of humanity. We came together for the first time in our history as a global species over the COVID-19 virus. That's the first time we as a species have come together globally. That's a huge shift in our consciousness, and that consciousness is continuing. And I do find that as we talk about it, I do find that when you mix with other experiences, the learning just continues and the vibrational frequency continues. It's almost contagious, one might say. So yes, I think it's very exciting times.
Yeah. I don't know whether I should say I chuckle when you say try to bring all religions together, because I mean, I look at the word impossible, and that really does define what impossible is. I mean, it all depends on who's prepared to walk across the room first and say welcome. I think once that happens, yeah, I think we've got a chance.
I would agree. I would agree. I mean, there are huge. It's all right, me sat here talking in the comfort of my own room. But yes, there are huge hurdles that we have to overcome. But bear in mind, we are being guided. These ETs are high conscious beings, whatever you want to call them. They are guiding us. So although it seems impossible, the impossible is achievable.
Yeah, I mean, you take Christianity for example. I mean, there's so many fractured groups within the Christianity movement, and they can't agree on things. So yeah, good luck.
Oh, I would agree. I would agree. I've got a lot of friends who are very religious, and but yes, they're fractured, just as in Christianity, let alone all the other religions. So yeah, a difficult task, but perhaps maybe like my friend, when they see a higher conscious being, it will alter their consciousness as a Christian, as a human species, and bring everyone together, as it did with my friend, a total skeptic all his life until he sees a craft. And then his whole persona changed in relation to it. His wife had always been spiritual. He never was. Again, a total skeptic. But we just need that one event to change our understanding. And I believe that the reveal will do that.
Kevin, more and more people are coming out and telling their stories, and they're being provided safe havens to do so, without having to go public and risk being ridiculed. I cast my mind back to my school days, and I'm going back a fair way, and there were always kids, either when I went through elementary school or went through high school, there was always a small number of kids who seemed a little bit abnormal, less social, more withdrawn. And only now, and I've thought back, used to think maybe they had some problems at home, but now I'm thinking, do you think there are some kids out there that are having experiences like you did at the same age, and just too frightened to talk about them, and they're starting to become more withdrawn?
Yes, I'm sure, because within our cultures, we're not allowed to talk about them. You'll get a label on you, and the label would be, abnormal. There's something wrong with that person. He sees ghosts. He sees dead people. He talks to people in his bedroom at night. People come into his bedroom. Where I think Mary Rodwell is the world expert on that. In fact, I was just watching a video of her this morning, and a fascinating, amazing woman. And she started, I think, 25, 30 years ago, talking to people about these experiences. And many of them are children. And I think we mentioned Susie Hansen, and she talks about the 3 waves of experiences. So I would probably be one of the first wave, one of the younger ones. There are now 2nd and 3rd waves coming through. We see children with higher IQs, children with an understanding of even consciousness itself at very early ages. But because we are opening up to talking about it, they're allowed to speak and they're not ridiculed. In fact, if they're guided, I see the position I've become because of my teachings by the ETs. If we start with our own children and teach them, then what can we achieve as humanity? I mean, I know it's a huge task, and
Hmm.
I speak with it with enthusiasm
Yeah.
because they've asked me to. And I feel that I'm just paying a little bit back by sharing the information they've given to me. And yes, we do open ourselves up to ridicule, but I'm thick-skinned. I'm 66 now, and still enjoying life, and hopefully continue for many more years.
Yeah, I posted an article on the site today. I'm talking about my interview with Chuck Zukowski, who was a field investigator. But I actually started it off by talking about my first ever UFO sighting. It was back in 2004, and even 16 years ago, I was reluctant to talk about what I saw because I feared being ridiculed. I mean,
Well, yes.
and that was just a UFO sighting. So
Well,
imagine how
that
hard it would be for somebody that has contact experience to come out and talk about it.
Yes, it's a huge leap, and especially if you start talking about telepathic communication. I mean, it's in the realms of delusion. Some people would think that, but I'm happy with it. I know others that have telepathic communication capabilities, and I know that some of these people have had the same contact with the same ETs that I have, and I've had confirmation from that. And I get confirmation, and I've always asked for confirmation of something when it happens, just to confirm, say that I'm not delusional, I'm not imagining it all. But when you mix and meet with others, we all share that same story. I met a lady down in Lakeland a while ago, and she's actually met with Orton D, two of the beings that I'm in contact with from the age of 8. And when we got together, we compared our notes, and they were almost identical. And she had information in there that you could only know if you'd spoken to Orton D. So, and I know of another lady now, although I haven't met her yet, who's had direct contact with Orton D. And I know some of the people I've mentioned here, they have their own ET contacts. I know that Ray Hernandez was asked to start the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute by his ETs. And he has regular visitations from them. And he was, I don't know how old he was when he started, when he had his first contact. He was an atheist, and he had his first contact, and it changed his whole life.
I think it was less than 10 years ago.
Less than 10 years, was it? Yes. So
Yeah.
I know I spoke at one of his conferences down in Miami. It's a while ago now, but a fantastic guy, and the amount of work that he puts into this is truly amazing. In fact, all these people I've mentioned today, and there are many, many more, they all put so much work into this. It's like we all have a mission. We all have a little piece of the jigsaw. We're bringing that jigsaw together. We don't know all the facts, everything, but we all have a little bit of knowledge. And I would say an expert probably in that little piece, in that little jigsaw.
I think one of the pieces to that jigsaw puzzle is the mainline UFO community. When I started covering this subject, the thing that struck me between the consciousness group and the mainline group is that there was a divide, and there seemed to be a lot of resentment on the mainline side. Now, I can see that coming together and closing that gap, starting to close up. But I mean, I think that's one of the first things that this particular subject, ufology, needs to fix straight away. I mean, you need to get the two groups on board together.
That's correct. I would say MUFON has been a nuts and bolts group, community, as it were, recording sightings, investigating them, but they did not touch on the consciousness side, on the ETs themselves side of it. But now, I know MUFON has its own experience and research team, and I think that's headed by Kathy Marden and Denise Stoner, and they work towards bringing these people together, these experiences. So MUFON do have their own department now for experiences, and I meet with many groups now of experiences by Zoom like this, because we can't travel anymore, but But it's fascinating. And you know straight away when they start telling their stories, because you can identify with them. And I mean, you couldn't make this up, could you, Dean?
No, no. Kevin, I just wanted to read a quote from the front of the book, the spiritual consciousness. It reads, Kevin's fascinating journey leads him within this world and into the next. So I wanted you just to talk a little bit about what is the world that we live in and what's the next world?
Okay, well, the world that we live in now, I believe, is a scientific world. And we lost our spirituality. And I think, as you said earlier, we have two sides to us, our spiritual side, which is a consciousness, and our physical side. But because we've not been allowed to, because our scientists, they're in their own teachings, have stayed away from consciousness, stayed away from spirituality, almost black and white, as it were. But now, because people are speaking about it, the scientists are now looking at other areas and realizing that we are more than just physical. So the new society will be one of people who are enlightened, people who understand consciousness. It will include the ETs. We are multidimensional beings. We're just not aware of it. That's been denied us. So we are much more than what we are taught or know in this current space-time dimension, shall we say. But we are moving forward now to this next stage. And it could happen at any moment. As I say, like my friend who saw the UFO, what would happen if UFOs appeared over every major city globally at once? How would that change our perspective of who we are as a species and our role within the universe, as it were?
Okay, so what's ahead for you? You've got another book coming out?
Yes, it came out this week. I don't have a copy with me. It's called Tap into Universal Energy, Understanding Cosmic Energy and Consciousness. And that was written with Melissa Kennedy
yep.
of BMK Publishing, and Edgar Yo, the two friends of mine. And they said they were writing a book. Would I like to contribute to that book? So I did, and the book came out this week. So I'm waiting for my copy to come, and then I'll be sharing some more information in there about some of my experiences, trying to explain consciousness and how it works in a more layman's term, shall we say, how we can understand. In fact, I gave an example, I think, of an experience I had with a dragonfly, believe it or not. But because of my understanding of consciousness, the dragonfly was caught in a netting, and I couldn't get the dragonfly out. So I got some scissors and I cut the netting, and the dragonfly left. It was a young one and beautiful colours, and it flew off. I was out later on in the day, and we have quite a few dragonflies here, and this dragonfly left where it was eating and followed me for quite a while. And then I went and sat down on my porch, and the dragonfly flew all around me, exactly the same colour, same size as the one I'd released. And the following day I went out again, and all the dragonflies followed me to my little chair where I sit on the front porch, and they're all flying around me. And I believe that because I showed that dragonfly some kindness, we have that shared consciousness. That dragonfly communicated that through his consciousness to the other dragonflies, and then they are aware that you're an enlightened being, shall we say. I don't particularly like that word, but we share that same consciousness. But then a few months later, I was actually pressure washing my driveway, and a fully grown dragonfly, exactly the same colours, came and landed on my head 3 times, flying around me. And I believe that was the mature dragonfly that had grown up, and it just came back to say hello. I know. Wow. I've seen things on the YouTube about that. There was a guy with a condor he saved from after it was born, and that condor comes and flies back to him once a year and greets him and puts his wings around him. Why? Because they share that consciousness, that one universal consciousness. And once that key is open, in fact, I saw another one on YouTube, and they're all examples. This guy raised a penguin, and the penguin was released when it was old enough to be released. But every year, the penguin swims 5,000 miles to come and see the guy that saved him. I mean, that's shared consciousness. That's an understanding. That's how close we are to the other realms of consciousness.
Okay. Yep. Kevin, always a pleasure, and we'll be speaking with you again pretty soon.
Okay.